I'm ready for all today, through all the pain, all the way, the fight for all, my life, the love, we're taking it all the way,
So when we're building a burger, right? The outsides, the exteriors, the buns, that's the early and the end of the draft, right? If you have whole wheat, I'm sorry, you just have bad taste. If you got sesame seeded buns, you're goated. That's the one. If you don't go for sesame seed, there's something wrong with you. I'm sorry, people. But today we're going to be talking about the meat, the bacon, actually, I'm not even a big fan of lettuce, the mayo, tomatoes, and all that good stuff. We're gonna be talking about the mid-round menaces, because that is what this episode is gonna be all about. But of course, with me today, we got some legends and Dave Kluge. Oh man, you gotta.
Kluge.
See the problem. Kluge. The problem is he doesn't know his last name.
Tip got it today in the video that he shared out on Twitter. He did his prep.
I'm not good. You know what? Everybody knows I'm not good with names. Dave Kluge on Mr. Football Guys. Yo, what is going on?
Not too much. Thanks for having me, man. This is fun. Just getting to chop it up. The season's gonna be here in no time. We got our first game of the season, kind of, right? Like Hall of Fame game. Like it's technically football. Like there's helmets with NFL logos on them and people on a field. It might not be real football, but we got that on Thursday, so that means the season's almost here.
If you're a drug addict for football or fantasy addict, I guess, like we are, then
I'm like Ashley Larry over here, man. Just from Chappelle, or no?
It's an itch scratcher right then and there in itself. But of course, in the other line, we got Mr. Tip, 32-bit full-time fantasy Thursday check down. God, that's a lot. With Greg Gulag, Fantasy Spaces of Bob Harris. Mr. Tip, help me out over here. What else you got on your list?
Rip and Tip space on X. Bob Harris, we have a space also starting in the season on Monday evenings, right before Monday Night Football. So yeah, man, I'm got my hands in a bunch of different cookie jars, although I got two hands. So maybe I got like 2 fingers in one and like 2 in the other, and then maybe a pinky in the other. I don't know. But anyway, but yeah, man, dude, I love talking ball. I'm so excited to be on here with both of you guys, man. This is going to be fun. 32-bit, loving it. We got a good show for you guys, so let's get it rocking and rolling.
I'm still on you have 2 fingers in one, another 2 fingers in another, and a pinky in another hole. Sorry, I went somewhere else with that. I thought you were going somewhere else with that. But anyway, right now we got the Olympics going on, and I'll be honest, this is probably one of my first times ever watching the Olympics. I've been kind of enjoying it, to be honest. Like seeing the superstars.
First time watching the Olympics?
Yeah,
come on, man.
I've always been on the I'm too cool for the Olympics trend.
No, the Olympics are awesome, man. My co-host is the same way. He was like trying to downplay the Olympics. I was like, "What are you talking about, man? Like it's amazing." Like my wife and I, we've had it on just 24/7, replays on during the day, prime time at night. Olympics are great.
They have been cool. The gymnastics, tons of fun. The swimming one, they've been fun too. But it's weird. I don't see America dominating like I kept hearing about consistently. Like I feel like a bunch of other countries are right there neck and neck with us. I mean, I'm sure if we played football against them, I think we'd be able to dog them on that one. So real quick. While we're talking about Olympics, if you had to build like an offensive roster, because obviously, the NBA did that, but if we had to do that for football side, Dave, you started off, who would be the quarterback? Like, is it Mahomes for sure?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's any question there. Mahomes is, I don't even know. I'd say we'd probably take Mahomes over Brady at this point. Like, even if it was 3 years ago, like he's that good. Okay.
Running back. Give me a list right now.
Running back, I mean, he's getting up there in age, but I think like Derrick Henry just he epitomizes what being an NFL running back is. There might be some other guys out there that are like a little bit better, like Brees and Bijan and Christian McCaffrey. These guys are fun, but like if we're putting our team out there to represent America, I think it's got to be Derrick Henry.
Okay, fair enough. Wide receivers?
Tip, why don't you take this one?
All right.
For me, it's Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, he's been counted out. He's an underdog. Yeah, it's got to be him. You know, he's tough as nails. Look at what his dad was Mr. Olympian, Mr. Yeah. So it makes perfect sense for me. And I mean, the dude's ripped up. The dude's fun to watch. He's a crowd pleaser, so he'll entertain the crowd as well. So for me, it's Amon-Ra St. Brown all day. Sun guy, give it to him.
Yeah, him and Justin Jefferson would be the other guy. Like, how do you stop that? Like, if Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball to Amon-Ra St. Brown and Justin Jefferson, it's impossible to stop.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of another country that would actually put up a fight. I mean, because right now, I think one of Japan's best players on basketball was 5'4", and I was thinking, like, okay, hold on. If Derrick Henry's running straight at him, yeah, he's running for like 400 yards that game. Sorry, people. I'm sorry. All righty. That's enough on that one. So before we go into the main topic of mid-round menaces, I usually like to have a quick tidbit on draft strategies, more specifically redraft strategies. And I always try to incorporate something, and usually every episode in the past I've incorporated something really small, just something like that for people to kind of learn a tidbit here and there. And I'll start off with you, Tip. When you're at the end of the draft, actually I should say when you're at the end of the round, so if your pick like either 101 or 1012, are you looking for players that you want specifically, or are you kind of looking for the value pick?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think you want to look for the value, but then you want players that you are fans of. You know, I always say don't draft with your heart, but I will say there is for instance, with me, Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's one of my favorite players to watch. He's always there, you know, towards the middle, the end of the round. So I try to look to get him as much as I can because I know he's going to be consistent. But that's the other thing too, consistency. You want somebody who you know year in and year out is going to be consistent.
Mr. Dave?
Yeah, I think you got to stick to ADP to some extent, but I don't think there's anything wrong with reaching a few picks. Like, Tip, you said Amon-Ra's one of my guys too. And like, yeah, I wrote an article about him, like put a stamp on him as like the my guy last year on our show right before kickoff. And like right now in ADP on most platforms, he's going behind Justin Jefferson and he's going behind Bijan Robinson, behind Breece Hall. Some places have him going behind AJ Brown. Like I'm okay reaching 2 or 3 spots to get Amon-Ra because I think he's that good. So I think like if your heart is telling you that, you know, ADP is wrong by 2 or 3 spots, I don't think there's anything crazy there. But like if you got the 101 pick and you really like George Kittle, like don't draft George Kittle 101 because you know you can get him later in the draft. So I think you have to play ADP to some extent, but you want to at least try to stay like within the same round.
Yeah. So, for example, like right now, let's say you're in the 4th round, last pick, and you see like Lamar Jackson available, for example. And you know he's probably not coming back to you if you don't take him right then and there. Now, are you drafting him a little early? Probably. But is that something you would still do, Dave?
Yeah, absolutely. And I got the Lamar Jackson jersey hanging up behind me. I'm a big fan of him. And, you know, his ADP is typically in round 4 or 5. And I'm A-okay taking him there. I think this year, like specifically, if we want to get into like the whole theory behind positional market values and things like that, I think this is a good year to wait on quarterbacks. So like if you're dead set on Lamar, like Lamar's my QB1 and he's getting drafted as a QB3 or QB4. So I'm okay taking him if he slides a little bit. But I think this is a year we're just on a bigger scope of the conversation. You know, I'd much rather just wait for a Jaden Daniels or a Caleb Williams or an Aaron Rodgers or Jared Goff. You know, there's so much value to be had at the quarterback position later. But yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with reaching a half round or a round or so for a player you really want.
Fair enough. All right, Tip, I already know your answer for who you're taking 101, and that's Bijan Robinson. Dave, I need to hear you say Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, it's McCaffrey.
It's great.
Yeah.
There we go. All right.
I mean, last year, Bijan Robinson had 2 touches inside the 5. Christian McCaffrey had 17. Like, they're just in such different offenses. Like, there's a world where Bijan Robinson outscores Christian McCaffrey this year. It could happen. But I'm just going to bet on the sure thing, the guy who's done it, you know, his entire career.
Yeah, fair enough. Tip, I just want you to know I'm going to be asking people this until you realize that Christian McCaffrey's one.
And I won't realize it. And I will not stand. Now, look, I will die on this hill. And I know a lot of people like to say that in spaces. I will die on the Bijan Robinson hill. The dude has a better offensive line. He has a better quarterback. He has weapons that the quarterback can throw to that are going to take some pressure off of him. I get it. Tyler Algier is there. But if you look at some of these games that Bijan Robinson has played and you look at the space that Coach Zach Robinson is going to get him in with these other players, I think the sky's the limit for this kid.
Fair enough. All right, now let's go to the mid rounds. All right, this is the juice, the burgers, the bacon of the whole episode. And right now, you guys pre-gave me the list of players that you wanted to talk about. I appreciate it. I thought it would be a surprise, but you know what? I like surprises, but I like knowing more. Mr. Dave, give me the first one.
Joe Mixon right now is like falling in around 5 in a lot of drafts, which is crazy to me. This guy's been a top 10 running back for 3 straight seasons. He was, the 2 years that he hasn't been inside the top 10, 2020, he was injured. 2017, he was a rookie. Outside of that, he's been a top 13 running back in every other season. And I think, the red flags are obviously there. He's 29 years old. Efficiency's trending downwards. He's on a new team. He already picked up a hamstring injury in the preseason. But what we're seeing is, while the efficiency is going down, we're seeing a growing role as a pass catcher and a goal line back, 2 things that are very important for fantasy production. Over the last 2 years, he's had 4.5 targets per game. He's had 18 carries inside the 5-yard line last year. The only guys that had more were Raheem Mostert and Gus Edwards. So this guy's catching passes. He's scoring touchdowns. That's how you get fantasy points. And I think the concerns about his age and his efficiency, it's well warranted, but I think that's all baked into his ADP. At the end of the day, this guy's 6'1", 230 pounds. He's a workhorse back on a good offense. And I see guys going ahead of him that are in similar situations, like Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, other guys that are aging and on new teams with some question marks. So I just look at Joe Mixon as being a much cheaper option to pivot off of those guys and get a similar player for a cheaper value late in your draft. So Joe Mixon right now, crazy how far he's fallen in drafts.
So real quick, I do want to ask the follow-up of Dameon Pierce. How much of a role do you expect him to have?
Wow.
Or Cam Akers? I'm throwing Cam Akers out of the way just because
Let's
I really
talk about
don't
Jamar
think
Johnson too over there. And, who else did they bring in?
Who else did they bring in? It's realistically, so Joe Mixon has never really had a phenomenal yards per carry.
Yeah.
And he's always had, I don't want to say a perfect situation, but a very good situation. He's always had an above average quarterback in Joe Burrow, and he's always had phenomenal wide receivers on the outside to take away stacked boxes from him. And the nice way to say it would be, I always felt like he underachieved to the potential of what I expected Joe Mixon to have. Why would he randomly have a better situation here on the Texans when realistically it's also the same way? He has a good quarterback, above average wide receivers on the outside, and you're for some reason still expecting him to have upper echelon production when he's never really done that.
I mean, he's been a top 13 back every single season that he's played. Been top 10 3 seasons. He's got a top 5 season as well. So it has been there. We've seen the production, and I think he's just kind of a boring player. Like, I don't think he's ever going to be a 22 point per game type of player, but that you're getting like somewhere between 14 and 16 PPR points just about every week with the occasional spike week. So I'm not worried about the other guys there. Dameon Pierce, I just want to throw it out there. I think he ends up getting traded. And you can clip this if he doesn't and clown me for it. But I talked with Aaron Wilson recently, who covers the Houston Texans, and he said it's probably not going to happen, but I just don't see that fit at all. Like the wide zone scheme that they run in Houston is predicated on being patient, waiting for these blocks to happen outside of the box, and then hitting that hole. And Dameon Pierce just doesn't really have that patience and that vision in his game. He's just a bull in a china shop. He wants to grab the ball and run into the guy that's directly ahead of him and try to break a tackle. Joe Mixon is a much more patient runner. So I think that just schematically, he fits better in this offense than Pierce does.
Mr. Tate,
and Nader, if I could just say one thing, I think what it is in the past we were drafting Joe Mixon in the first round, at the end of the second, or at the beginning of the second round. I think now if you get him in the 5th, where you can kind of play around with that 0 RB strategy, if that's something you want to do, I wouldn't be mad at him as my number 1 running back. And then if you follow up with that, I know typically 0 RB is in the 5th, 6th round. So if we're talking this is, Joe Mixon, that's perfect, because you're now got yourself 3 really good wide receivers, possibly a good tight end, or if you have a four slots for a wide receiver, you have 4 really good wide receivers, and then him as your number 1 in a good offense, like Dave said. And I think that's the big thing. In the past, like I said, last year Joe Mixon started to slip a little bit, but before then, you could get him at the end of the first round. I even remember years before that, he would be a mid first round pick.
Yeah, I will definitely agree with that point. You do make a good point. Usually Joe Mixon is in the higher echelon of the drafts. So seeing this mediocre production out of him was a little bit disheartening, but now that he's going in like the fourth round, then it definitely has more justified to maybe more above average results. Something I will say in the positive of Joe Mixon is that he switched divisions and he's not going against the Steelers, the Ravens, and the Browns 8 times a year. He's going against a much weaker division, especially much weaker run defense. I definitely like Joe Mixon in itself. Is there any other closing statements before we go on to Tip's first pick?
No, I want to hear who Tip's hyping up here.
Let's hear it, Tip.
So for me, it's David Montgomery, and a lot of people out here, they're going with Jahmyr Gibbs. I've been doing some mock drafts lately. I actually did a draft online, and Jahmyr Gibbs went 6th overall, and I wasn't mad at it because it was a PPR league. Hey, Jahmyr Gibbs is electric. He's a great player, but let's not forget about David Montgomery. David Montgomery last year, I understand he got hurt, but had he not gotten hurt, had he played all of those games, he would have had 285 total touches. That's a lot. That's good production. That's over 16 touches per game. In an offense that's well balanced. We talked about Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'm not going to talk about him anymore. He's my favorite player. We also got Sam Laporta over there. You've got a coach in Dan Campbell who wants to be a balanced offense. He wants to run the ball. They're going to be in a lot of really good game scripts where they may be up quite a bit, so they're going to pound the rock to close out the game. So I'm thinking, hey, go and get David Montgomery in the same situation as a Joe Mixon. Now, he may not have had the pedigree that Joe Mixon had in the previous seasons, but look, you get him in the 5th, 6th round right now where he's going. I think it's a no-brainer. I would wait. I would, again, if you want to go that wide receiver theory, even if you don't, if you want to go with the running back, him as my second running back in the 5th round, I would be ecstatic to have him on my team.
Yeah, I mean, we just saw Jamal Williams tear it up in this offense 2 years ago, getting almost nothing but goal line work. And last year, that was David Montgomery's role. He had over twice as many touches inside the 5-yard line than Jahmyr Gibbs did. So it gets worrisome drafting a guy like that where you're banking on the touchdown upside, because I don't think David Montgomery is going to be seeing 250 plus touches here. But when you're in the mid rounds, I think that it makes sense to swing for the fences, and you end up falling into these traps of guys that we like project volume onto that aren't that good. I think the out with David Montgomery isn't the volume. It's the fact that in this explosive offense where they're playing almost all their games indoors, they've got an elite offensive line and they get a ton of scoring opportunities. He could realistically score 15 or 20 touchdowns this year.
Yeah, and you just said it too. Just to say one thing, Nader, you just said it, Dave. They are playing all of their games are indoors this year, other than I believe 3.
2 or 3, yeah, and like one of them's like an outdoor game in San Francisco in December.
Yeah,
it's gonna be beautiful. Like they're not gonna have a bad weather game this year.
Yeah, other than that, so that's why I'm a little higher on Jared Goff this year. I'm higher on the offense because you're not gonna have to deal with the elements that sometimes in the colder months you will have to deal with. But yeah, go ahead, Nader.
So one minor knock on David Montgomery. I actually like the pick a lot because I think he had, other than the one game he got hurt, had to leave early. He only had one game under 10 fantasy points, which I mean, at his ADP would be phenomenal if he was to repeat that. One only knock is that he only had, I think, 5 games with a snap percentage of over 50%. So I know Gibbs is going to take a significant snap share. But Dave, do you expect him to overtake him significantly more, or do you still expect that little 50-50 split?
Yeah, it's going to be a split, but that's like almost every running back room in today's NFL. Like you get your handful of guys, Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall, maybe Joe Mixon, who we just talked about, Derrick Henry. Like you've got a handful of guys that are going to see 70-80% of the backfield opportunities, but just about every backfield is going to be split in some extent. I think the nice thing about this one is we can kind of expect how the touches are going to be split. Like you compare to a backfield like Tennessee, where Tajay Spears and Tony Pollard do all of the same things. I don't know how the hell that backfield is going to be split up. Like it could be a 50-50 split down the middle, could be 50-50 split in the pass game, could be 50-50 split in the red zone. I don't know. I know looking at the Lions that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be getting the long down and distance. He's going to be getting the passing down work. He's going to get mixed in for some occasional early down work, but the majority of the early down and goal line work is going to be going Montgomery's way.
So real fast, I do want to kind of, this is just a random parentheses side note here, because I'm really curious that it came up and I really want to ask. Tyler Algier, it was just, the report was that he's going to have a much larger role than expected this year. Do we expect it to go into Bijan Robinson? And are you interested in Tyler Algier?
Not especially. I mean, this is he did rush for 1,000 yards as a rookie, which is certainly impressive. But like I said, this is every backfield now. Like the mantra in fantasy football a decade ago was avoid Patriots running backs because they run this backfield by committee and everybody has their own specialized role. Well, now that's every single backfield. Like I don't expect, like, Christian McCaffrey might be the only guy that gets all of the passing down work, all of the goal line work. I'm expecting Breece Hall is probably going to cede some work to Braylon Allen, and Bijan Robinson's probably going to cede some work to Tyler Algier. That's just the NFL that we're living in today. That's just how it works.
All right, real quick, back to you, Dave. Who else do you want in those mid rounds?
This guy's probably been my favorite value in drafts so far. George Kittle right now getting drafted as the tight end 7. Seriously might be my favorite picks in drafts this year. I think that you definitely want to walk away with one of the top 7 tight ends just because the elite tight end batch has really grown a bit. Like, it used to just be Travis Kelce. Then it was Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews. Then TJ Hawkinson got in the mix. And then Evan Ingram got traded to Jacksonville. And then we get this influx of young guys coming in. So I think if you don't get one of those top 7 tight ends, you're kind of at a disadvantage against your league mates almost every single week. So George Kittle is going at the end of that tier. And I just don't understand why. I mean, like, the narrative surrounding George Kittle throughout his career is that he blocks too much to be a reliable fantasy tight end. But since 2019, his route participation has gone up every single year. In 2019, it was all the way down at 70%. Last year, he had a 95.3% route participation, which was 3rd best in the NFL. And while he did that, running a ton of routes, he still led the league in receiving yards, yards per route run, yards per target, yards per reception, yards per team pass attempt, EPA, deep targets. Like, this man is an efficiency beast, and he's seeing a growing role in the passing game. He's also top 3 in snap share, target depth, air yard share, yards after the catch, fantasy points per route run, fantasy points per target. Like, I can go on and on, but this guy checks every single box from an efficiency and a usage standpoint. Just had the most yards last year that he's had since 2019. So there's definitely going to be some ups and downs, right? Like, George Kittle is a boomer bust guy. There's a lot of mouths to feed in San Francisco. But when he has those winning weeks, gives you such an advantage over your opponent. And right now, you could draft him behind so many guys that it's just crazy to me that you see guys like Aaron Jones and Terry McLaurin and Keenan Allen, Kyle Pitts and Trey McBride going ahead of him. George Kittle's my tight end 5 right now, but knowing that you can draft him in like round 7 or 8 after already getting strong quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, just like I said, the easiest pick in drafts this year.
Right now, as I look at the ADPs, George Kittle is right behind Kyle Pitts. Are you taking George Kittle over Kyle Pitts?
I am, yeah. But it's not like I'm outright reaching for George Kittle ahead of Kyle Pitts. I'll wait for somebody else to take Kyle Pitts, and then I'll take George Kittle after.
Yeah, I'll let somebody else make the mistake of taking Kyle Pitts.
Whoa. Let's pump the brakes. I think Kyle Pitts is a very good football player. All right? I got him in the same tier as Kittle.
I just don't see it on Kyle Pitts. I think he's just going to be that guy that does nothing, and it's going to be those, you know what he could have been, and then he's going to be like Josh Rosen. He's going to go to another team, not going to do anything, go to another team, do nothing, and everyone's going to be like,
Nader, come on,
if he was on our team,
you cannot throw that name on him. No, do not throw that name on.
That's what he's doing so far.
Dude has 1,000 yards.
Mike Ditka is the only tight end that ever had more yards in his rookie season. This guy played with the rotted out plus of Matt Ryan. He played with Desmond Ridder and Marcus Mariota.
Yeah,
this guy, like, his yeah. Kyle Pitts. I'm going to switch. The next guy I'm going to talk about is going to be Kyle Pitts now.
I don't want to talk about Kyle Pitts. God.
Too late, Nader, because you're going to hear about it tonight. So.
I don't want to do this to myself. Yeah, I mean, I'm significantly higher on George Kittle than Kyle Pitts. I think George Kittle is on the much better offense, much more competent offense. I trust the quarterback more. And George Kittle is just a much better tight end than Kyle Pitts. So
We were talking about like who we'd pick on the Olympic team. George Kittle would be my tight end.
Yeah, George Kittle, hands down. He got that dog,
fun, man. Yeah,
he's fun. And he's got that dog in him. Unfortunately, Kyle Pitts doesn't have that dog in him. He's more of like a cat, maybe.
Yo, have you guys seen that receiver show where they actually showed his house or somebody's house, and the dude had sneakers in the ceiling? That was dope. Like I was like,
that show was great, man. I like that even better than quarterback. It was awesome.
Yeah, I was like, this dude's got sneakers in his ceiling. Hold on, bro. I'm down. It was crazy.
As somebody who lives in San Francisco, I don't want to rewatch this Super Bowl game. I'm skipping out on that question. All right. Mr. Tip, do you have any closing statements on the homie George Kittle?
I like George Kittle, man. I like I said, I love what he does on the field. He's gonna be on the field all the time because he's one of the greatest, if not the greatest, run blocking tight ends that we have right now in the game. So I like him. I don't see any slowdown in his game. I know he's approaching 31, 32 years old. So it's about to happen, but I don't think it's going to be this year. And then another thing too, with the whole Brandon Ayuk situation, hey, that just means, and Ricky Pearsall is dealing with the hamstring injury, I believe it was. So it just means more targets for Kittle, possibly even earlier. But there are going to be those weeks where you're like, man, what the hell? Where did Kittle go? And that's just the tight end. Other than Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews, that's just how tight end situations can be.
Yeah, especially with the Niners. Like the Niners, more specifically Shanahan, he is more than willing to use a tight end to pass protection, more specifically if the offensive line isn't up to par. And with the Niners on the right side specifically, anybody other than, unfortunately, I'm terrible with names. I can't remember the left tackle. Trent Williams. There we go.
Trent Williams. Yep.
Yeah. They are at a huge disadvantage. So he is consistently on that right side, pass protecting if necessary. So, I mean, while George Kittle is a phenomenal pick at the ADP he currently is, he might be like Amari Cooper at times where he just kind of throws a disappearing act and you wonder where he is.
Now, I remember last week they were saying that Trent Williams was holding out. So I haven't seen anything here recently or in the last day. And the thing about Trent Williams is if he does hold out or if he does not play, that offensive line is going to be in trouble, and they're going to ask Kittle to do a lot more. Yeah, they're going to do
a lot of guys last offseason, and it showed. But I'm not worried about the holdout. This is just how the 49ers operate. Like they always wait till like right before kickoff. Like when did Debo get his contract? It was like a week before the season kicked off. I'm sure right before the season kicks off, Ayuk and Williams are going to get paid.
Yeah, same with Bosa. He got his contract like I think a couple of days before the season started. But all right, Mr. Dave, give us another person. Actually, no, sorry, we're on Tip's turn now. Sorry.
So we talked about the lettuce, the buns, the sesame seed buns, but we didn't talk about any sauce, bro. Like the ketchup, the secret sauce, whatever it is, it's Brian Thomas Jr. That's what it is for me. This guy's going 114 right now in ADP, and I get it. He's a rookie, but look at the situation he's going into. He's going to the Jacksonville Jaguars, who I believe is going to be one of those upcoming offenses this year. Trevor Lawrence, don't talk to me about you don't believe in Trevor Lawrence. The dude can ball, the dude can play. Look at what he did last year with Calvin Ridley coming in, made Calvin Ridley a 1,000-yard receiver. Trevor Lawrence was banged up last year. They got a good offense. And now you bring in Gabe Davis to the situation. Gabe Davis is one of the premium blocking wide receivers out there. It's not. Look, I'm not going to get into it as far as catching the ball and things like that because he's going to be hit or miss. But there's 136 vacated targets that Calvin Ridley has left to these two guys. Now, I'm not here to say that Brian Thomas is going to run away and be Rookie of the Year, be a Puka Nacua reincarnated in Jacksonville, nothing like that. But what I will say is towards the end of the season, when he gets acclimated to the speed of the game, his 6'3" frame at 205 pounds and has that catch radius that can get some of those catches that Trevor Lawrence will throw that aren't as accurate. I love the kid. He has great separation. I think he can be one of those guys as a 5th or 6th wide receiver on your team, especially at that ADP, that you want to hold on to him And if you don't have him on your team, he's a guy that I'm going to be looking to add onto my team by trading in week 3, 4 before the sauce that I was talking about starts to seep into that meat. And then you can just, man, take it from there. I really, really, really like this kid, Brian Thomas Jr.
Mr. Dave, how do you feel about this one?
I really like Brian Thomas. I like leading up to the draft, I kept saying like Brian Thomas is exactly what the Jacksonville Jaguars need. Like they have this role in the offense and they tried shoehorning Calvin Ridley into that role last year. That's not what Calvin Ridley does best. Like he's better playing across the middle of the field, yards after the catch. Brian Thomas is an outside receiver and that's what they needed. And they were forcing Calvin Ridley to play this role. So on draft night, when the Jaguars were sitting on the board and Brian Thomas was there and they traded back, I was livid. I couldn't believe it. I was like, that's the guy you need. And then they traded back and they still got the guy that they needed. I think it's just a perfect fit. I think that his skill set is very complementary to what Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram do, kind of working underneath, working across the middle of the field. It's just going to help Trevor Lawrence, but I think that it's a great fit. So I'm completely with it. A lot of people, I understand the excitement for Brock Bowers, but in my dynasty rookie rankings, I actually had Brian Thomas ahead of Brock Bowers, and I got a lot of pushback for that. But I just see, fireworks here in Jacksonville with Brian Thomas, just slotting into that need that they really have in Jacksonville.
Oh no, you're absolutely correct to put Brian Wilson over Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers is going to be Kyle Pitts 2.0.
Yeah, look, I didn't come here for the Raiders slander today. I didn't come here for that.
I'm sorry, man. I forgot.
We the problem is Dave and I, we just spit facts. And sometimes the issue is sometimes we're just right too early.
Did you? Here's what I'll tell you, Tip. Here was my thought process behind putting Brian Thomas ahead of Brock Bowers. The reason I wanted to do it is because we see this consistently with these highly drafted tight ends. They disappoint in year one, and their value falls out from underneath them. I think Brian Thomas is going to be an immediate contributor. We might not see it from Brock Bowers in year one because Devontae Adams is still there. Jacoby Myers is still there. Michael Mayer is still there.
Yeah.
Some tight end snaps as well. So my whole kind of thesis is like, why pay up for Brock Bowers now when I could get him for cheaper after this year? And I think that's it. So I'm going to be trying to buy Brock Bowers for cheap after this season. I would just rather take Brian Thomas now because I think he's going to be an immediate contributor.
I think my thought process was the hairline. You've never like I can't think of one good NFL player with a bad hairline. Never.
That's a good point. Trey Lance's, man, his hair.
Oh man, Trey Lance is bad, bro.
And Dallas, man, we can't have this guy.
Exactly. And how bad is he at Dallas? He's not. He's like the third on the. It's a proven fact. You want to know how I got to here at this level? Just look at the hairline. If his hairline isn't good, he can't play football. I don't know how it works.
You guys, all of you guys. I think I have pretty good hair too. You can't see it because it's back here. All of us are rocking pretty good hair, man.
I hide it well. I need to take an airplane trip to Turkey to get a hair transplant pretty soon. All right, but back to the main topic of Brian Thomas. I mean, I like him a lot. I'm gonna say I like him a lot. But I don't trust Jacksonville. That's just me. And more specifically, the quarterback. I'm just going to put it out there. I'm not the biggest fan of him. But Tip, why should somebody draft him over somebody right behind him is Curtis Samuel. Right there at pick 122. Well, Brian Thomas is 121. Why should somebody take him over Jamison Williams, who's a couple picks before that, or Jackson Smith and Jigba, who's also before that, or even 4 picks before that, Cortland Sutton.
Yeah, so this is my thing with Brian Thomas Jr. Like I said, it's going to be something. This is what this team needed. Dave just said it. You're going to have Christian Kirk. You're going to have Evan Ingram in there taking care of the middle, taking care of what needs to be done intermediate wise. But when it comes to the outside, when it comes to throwing the ball down the field, also getting some of those yak yards that Brian Thomas could possibly get, that's where he's really, with that blocking that Gabe Davis will help with, that's really where it's at, man. And you want to go for one of those offenses, I think, in the Jacksonville Jaguars offense, who's a little sneaky. So I know that you did say Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel, I like him a lot, and he's actually reuniting with his OC from Carolina. I like that. However, he's one of those gadget guys. And this is going to be a situation where you got Dalton Kincaid, you got Dawson Knox. Let's not forget about him. You've got Keon Coleman. You've got Khalil Shakir, should he come back and be, healthy. I know he got banged up. You've got a lot of different mouths to feed there, but you also got people who kind of do the same thing. I know Curtis Samuel can come out of the backfield, which is cool, but I just heard a report that they're still going to be utilizing Josh Allen out of the backfield. So, he's not going to want to give up the ball. And I like Curtis Samuel, but I think that if you want to get true value from this spot, Brian Thomas, I'm not a big JSN guy. I just, there's too many mouths over there. I think that it's the DK Metcalf year. So I'm really big on those guys. But Brian Thomas, I think, again, once this season gets really going and once this offense gets really going, he's a perfect fit for this offense. He's that sauce.
There we go. All right, Dave, bring us around town with another.
Jonathan Brooks is another guy that I just can't stop drafting in these middle rounds, whether I'm going like 0 RB, hero RB, like doesn't matter. You can just fit him into any build. I just think that he's going to be on so many winning rosters next year. He was the top running back in this class, goes to Carolina, a team that is desperate for a running back. Miles Sanders was terrible last year. I don't even know if he's going to be on the team come week 1. Chuba Hubbard was just kind of there, but not really doing much, like getting 25 opportunities per game and giving us RB3 production. This offense in Carolina, I'm expecting big things from. They made investments in offensive line and wide receiver. And then they also brought in Dave Canales, the guy who resuscitated Geno Smith 2 years ago, resuscitated Baker Mayfield last year. So I've got some hope that I don't think that Bryce Young is a terrible quarterback. I think that we saw the worst last year, and I think that it can only get better from here. You look at Jonathan Brooks, what he did in college. He was top 2 in PFF's rushing and receiving grade. And the obvious concern here is that he's coming off the ACL tear. He's already on the NFI list. We don't know if he's going to be ready week 1, but I looked at his injury compared to Todd Gurley's, and the timeline was almost identical. These guys both got hurt in early November, the year before they were drafted. Gurley also drafted as the RB1 in his class, and he averaged 16 points per game as a rookie, and that was missing week 1, slowly getting ramped up through his first few weeks. But what really excited me about that is Todd Gurley's rookie season coming off the ACL from the year before in weeks 14 through 17, the fantasy football playoffs, he averaged 19.9 PDR points per game. So that's kind of the thesis that I'm seeing with Jonathan Brooks here, is that like maybe you can get some early season production from him. That's just kind of the cherry on top. Really what you're drafting Jonathan Brooks for is a guy who's going to be seeing 20 to 25 touches per game during the fantasy playoffs. You're drafting him right now in round 8 or 9, and you could be potentially getting a late season RB1.
Mm-hmm. So Jonathan Brooks is an interesting one, mostly because, you said Miles Sanders, and then it took me back to flashbacks of how bad he was last year. And then you said Chuba Hubbard as well, and he was equally as bad, if not worse. God, I really hope Jonathan Brooks is better. Like they need a running back on that roster, and he has the potential, like you said, to be a RB1, because realistically, if he averages like 3.5 yards per carry, which isn't the greatest, but he'd still be significantly the best running back on that roster. That being said, of course, right now he is RB31, ADP around the 88 mark. So would it be, that'd be the 8th round if it's a 12 early
8th, 9th round.
8th round, yeah. Right now, but around him, I do want to ask like a mini this or that. Right now, Tony Pollard is 82nd, while Brooks is 88. Which one would you rather have between the two?
I prefer Pollard there, but I'm very bullish on Pollard. So you're asking me another guy that I really like.
What about Nick Chubb? He's 84.
Oh, I'm easily taking Jonathan Brooks ahead of Nick Chubb. Like Nick Chubb coming off of another injury. His injury was much worse, a multi-ligament tear. He's 29 years old as opposed to Jonathan Brooks, who's 21. And then the other out for Jonathan Brooks, I briefly mentioned it, that he was top 2 in his class in receiving grade last year. He's a great receiver, and we saw that last year. That was kind of Breece Hall's out. Like, even when he didn't look like his old self in those first few weeks back, he was still catching a ton of passes and kind of padding his numbers there. So I think we could see that with Jonathan Brooks. Like, even if he's not 100% healthy, he's going to get a ton of check down work, the same way that we saw Rachaad White getting that check down work last year, where Nick Chubb doesn't have that out. He's not a pass catcher.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Mr. Tip, what do you got for us on this one?
Yeah, I like the Jonathan Brooks. I like more of the offense. I do think that this offense is going to be significantly improved. I am a big Dave Canales truther. I think that this guy, again, Dave said it. Look at what he did for Geno. Look at what he did for Baker. I think that this offense is on the rise. They really got some guard help, and that guard help is going to help with the smaller stature quarterback in Bryce Young. So I like it. I think this offense is on the rise. The injury does bother me a little bit. It concerns me, but this is something that you could get in those later rounds, and this guy could be one of those players that does something during the playoff season. So that's where you get somebody like a Jonathan Brooks.
I think one of the best things about him is the strength of schedule that he has. I mean, he is in such a weak division. And he's going to have consistently good matchups after consistent good matchups. So, somebody like him, I'm more than willing to take a shot on my roster to see how that goes, especially if he doesn't start off the season. You can put him in your IR slot, pick up another running back. That'd probably be just as good, if not a better case scenario for the homie. But
the last thing I'll say about Jonathan Brooks, if you do draft him, I think it makes sense to pair him up with a guy that might not be really good, but we know is going to get some early season work, like a Devin Singletary or Zach Moss or Gus Edwards, somebody that can kind of get you through those early weeks while you're waiting to call up Jonathan Brooks to the active squad.
There you go. Just like
and
that.
Watch those waiver wires too, because you're going to have some players or some people that are just going to be, I'm done with him. Don't want to have him sitting on my roster, like you just said, with the IR spot, which is smart. But you have some people out there that maybe you don't have an IR in your league, but watch for those waivers for somebody like that. That happened to me last year with Ezekiel Elliott, and in the playoffs.
Oh, yeah. He was an RB1 down the stretch.
Yeah, he killed it, man. And that's exactly the type of moves you got to have to kind of look to make. Look for those people dropping people just because sometimes they'll drop them quietly. You're like, oh, he was there. Okay, we pick him up. So that's one of the things too.
And especially the rookies. It's crazy to me that people draft rookies and then drop them 2 or 3 weeks later. We know it takes time for rookies to get up to speed. We still clown the guy in my home league that dropped Justin Jefferson his rookie season after week 3 because he was worried about BC Johnson getting snaps. And then, somebody else snagged up Justin Jefferson and won the league. So don't be that guy. If you draft a rookie, exercise some patience.
Yep.
Flashback to that happening in my league, and I was the one.
It happened in almost every league.
Take him. Yeah. Okay. You know what? I'm not gonna clown on your buddy on that one. You know what? It happens. It'd be that way sometimes, and lately it'd be that way all the time. But give me one more, and then we're gonna talk about players that we don't like.
All right. So for me, we're gonna stay in this division, and I told you, Nader, we were gonna talk about this guy again. It's God, Kyle Pitts.
Let's go.
Look, he's ADP is 60 right now. He's going in the 5th round. He fits right in this meat and potatoes or whatever. What did you call it? Meat and bun. He fits right in there, man. So look, the dude had 1,000 yards with broke down Matt Ryan throwing on the ball with the Desmond Ridder, who I don't even think is NFL worthy, and a Marcus Mariota, who is an NFL worthy quarterback, but just not the guy. Now you get Kirk Cousins. Who does Kirk Cousins like to throw the ball to other than his number one wide receiver, which is Drake London? And I think Drake London's it for a good year too. He likes to throw to the tight end position when he's throwing the ball. Now, look, I will say this. Kirk Cousins at the beginning of this season, they are going to ease him into this. See, that's another reason why I'm so big on Bijan, because they're going to run the ball heavy because they want to bring Captain Kirk in as smoothly as possible. But we're talking about Kyle Pitts. Guy has 1,000 yards receiving. He has Zach Robinson. We talked about Zach Robinson earlier. I'm going to talk about him again because what Zach Robinson likes to do is he likes to spread a defense out and utilize his playmakers all over the field. I can see a situation where Kyle Pitts is utilized like a Puka Nacua. And if they start to run slots and route combinations like they did in LA, I think we're looking at another 1,000-yard receiver in season in Kyle Pitts, as long as he stays healthy. I know he's got that knee situation. As long as this guy stays healthy, touchdowns, I don't like to predict those, but I do like to say that if this guy stays healthy with those route concepts and combinations that they like to run, and they're bringing it to Atlanta, he plays in a dome as well. He plays in a weaker division that we just talked about. Now, I think it can happen, and I am of the I will die on this hill again with the Kyle Pitts. Now, the question is, are you, and I'm talking to all of you out there who hate Kyle Pitts or are done with him, are you willing to do this one more time? Give it one more chance. What did Biggie say? Give me one more chance. Are you willing to do it? Because I think if you do, you will be very happy this year.
So the one thing I'll push back to, you said that he likes to focus on his tight end, that Kirk Cousins likes to target his tight ends. But I think it's really tough to even make that comparison because like TJ Hawkinson, his average target depth last year was like 4 or 5 yards. Like that guy was just running little 5-yard curls right off the line of scrimmage, where Kyle Pitts was running his average targets about 14 yards downfield. So you look at like where he lines up on the field and where he's running his routes. Kyle Pitts is actually like more similar to Justin Jefferson than he is to TJ Hawkinson and how he's utilized. And then last year, you mentioned it briefly, but he was coming off knee surgery. And like you watch the first half of the season, he was terrible. Like when he tried turning left on that injured knee, he would just fall over. Like he couldn't even break to the left. Like he was like Derek Zoolander out there. Like he could only turn in one direction. Still led all tight ends in air yard share, target depth, deep shots. Had one of the best true catch rates in the NFL. Had one of the best contested catch rates in the NFL. But what really excites me about Kyle Pitts is, we want tight ends that are going to play primarily out of the slot because those guys aren't putting their hand in the dirt. They aren't blocking. When they're lined up in the slot, they're running routes. And last year, Dalton Kincaid and Mark Andrews were the only tight ends that ran a higher rate of their snaps out of the slot. So, I mean, all the signs are there. Like you look at the peripheral metrics for Kyle Pitts, like he's an elite tight end that's just been hamstrung by a terrible situation. And the reports out of camp right now from Atlanta are that Kirk Cousins is just like, everybody's just slack-jawed that this is the best quarterback play that they've seen in Atlanta for years. So I'm completely with it, man. I prefer George Kittle, but I am very in on Kyle Pitts as well.
And, another thing that we will talk about as well is the offensive line. I'm a big proponent as if you have a good offensive line, you don't necessarily need your tight end to be in line blocking as much. Look at Detroit. Detroit has a really good offensive line. That's why I was a little high on Sam Laporta last year. I had a conversation with my homeboy Debro from Fantasy Pros, and he was like, "Hey, who are some tight ends that you like?" I like Sammy Laporta because look at the offense. The offensive line is set. All you have to do is get this guy in space. Yeah, he might have to block here every once in a while because that's what a tight end does. But for the most part, this offensive line in Atlanta is also very good. So that's where they're going to be utilizing Kyle Pitts in those spaces and getting him loose.
So
do it, Nader. You got to get him one league. Get him in one league, bro.
I'm not doing it. We'll never do it. We'll never do it. Kyle Pitts. He's like Tyler Eifert 5-7 years ago, where it's like, oh, he's gonna do it this time. He's gonna do it this time. This is his year, and never. I mean, before he tore his ACL, since then he's played like 10 games in 2 years. Even before he tore his ACL, he was like tight end 18 in PPR scoring. It's like he can't run routes. He can't. He's not good at running routes. That's why his average targeted depth is so high. Yet there still isn't the percentage of production to match it. He can't run a route. Like a safety doesn't need to be big enough to guard him because he could just stay around him and guard him. A linebacker is fast enough to guard him. He's not that fast. Like he is a mid tight end, and I'm tired of hearing him being an elite. I just don't think he's good. That's it. And usually when I have these like gut feelings on these guys, I'm usually right because we have on the show he who must not be named. I've been ridiculed about him for how long, and now I'm doing my run on him. And what's his name? Hold on, I'm trying to remember his name. All of a sudden, he was drafted by the Panthers about 4 years ago, the 3rd round. Wide receiver, had like one screen pass for a touchdown. No, before this.
Laviska Shenault.
Laviska Shenault, that's the guy.
Oh,
God,
okay.
I remember getting so much hate for saying how bad he is. Nobody believed me. And oh God. Anyway, I hate that guy. You know, it's very hard to hate somebody. I hate that guy. Anyway. Yeah, I don't know.
I hear you. Wait. I'm gonna call you out, Nader. I hear you say you hate somebody on every show, and this is the 3rd show I've done with you. So now you got to get rid of that hate, brother. Get some love. I'm telling you.
I'm a hater at heart.
I'm telling you though. Look. Get Kyle Pitts on one of your teams, man. Just one.
I can't do this to myself. I don't know. You know what? For you, if he falls to me and I feel like okay, it's decent value, like if it's like the 7th round and I need a tight end, I'll do it. I'll do it.
Okay.
I'm gonna try really hard not to do it though. I'll be honest with you. All right, Dave, give me off of this conversation about him. Give me somebody else.
We're talking about guys that we are
Don't
avoiding
want.
now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I'm going to go with Jaden Reed. Right now, this guy's getting drafted as a wide receiver 34. He's the first Green Bay wide receiver getting drafted off the board, going ahead of Christian Watson, ahead of Romeo Doubs, ahead of Dontavian Wicks, ahead of Bo Melton. I just don't see it. Like you look at his numbers last year, 17.6% target share. That was 49th in the league. 10.3 ADOT was 60th in the league. So I kind of look at those like target share and target depth. Like if you're able to draw a high value or a high volume of targets, I don't care where the ADOT is. Like if you're getting them close to the line of scrimmage, cool. You could still have a Rashee Rice or a Deebo Samuel type of season. But if you're struggling to draw targets and you're struggling to draw valuable targets deep downfield, that's concerning to me. That's what we saw from Jaden Reed last year, is that he wasn't drawing a lot of targets, and the targets that he was drawing were near the line of scrimmage. He was also 20th in the air yard share, which was 61st in the league, and his route participation was 78th in the league. I mean, this guy was only coming on the field for 3 wide receiver sets, which the Packers don't run a lot of, and he was playing almost exclusively out of the slot. So there are some alluring metrics here, you know, the fantasy points per target, fantasy points per route run, QB rating when targeted. But those are all skewed by touchdowns. And this guy scored 10 times last year on a very small sample. I don't expect that to happen again. And really what it comes down to is just, typically I want to target these ambiguous wide receiver situations. And I think that does open and present some values here, but I don't think there's any value with Jaden Reed. Like Christian Watson, when you look at what he did when all the wide receivers were healthy, Christian Watson was still very clearly the wide receiver 1. Romeo Doubs, he's a guy that might not have the flashy efficiency metrics, but he's a good blocker. He stays on the field. Jordan Love trusts him. The rest of the team loves him. He's a leader who's going into year 3 there. So I think that's just kind of the fear here, is that Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs are playing in 2 wide receiver sets. Jaden Reed does what he did last year, only comes on the field when they're doing a 3 wide receiver set. They need him playing out of the slot. And if he can't recreate last year's touchdown rate, he's going to be a huge bust at ADP. So I feel like all the upside is baked into Jaden Reed's ADP. We're expecting him to change up his usage and see a larger role. But if that doesn't happen, it's just a landmine right now going in rounds 5 and 6.
So right now, Christian Watson is death, taxes, and a hurt hamstring after week 4.
Yep.
I feel like this is where Jaden Reed has his moment to shine. I think that's why his ADP is a little bit higher, or steroided in a way, is because, I mean, Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson, they don't stay healthy. You know, at some point, they're both going to get hurt. And Jaden Reed, and more specifically as well, Dontavian Wicks, are going to have significantly more snap rate because of injuries.
But I think the problem is Jaden Reed hasn't shown us that he can be an outside receiver yet. And I think that he does his best work out of the slot. So if Watson goes down, if Doubs goes down, I think what we're going to see is more work to Dontavian Wicks and Bo Melton. I don't know if Jaden Reed, given his small stature, I don't know if he's somebody that they're just going to say, okay, go play flanker for us now, because I don't think he's got that in his skill set. So I think it's a lot like, Tyler Boyd during his time in Cincinnati, where he's playing primarily out of the slot. And we see a lot of these guys later on in their career, like that's where Cooper Kupp started. Like Cooper Kupp was just a slot receiver. And then as he got older and he developed his game a little bit, he was able to start winning outside. Amon-Ra St. Brown, rookie season, he was only playing out of the slot. And then he started to develop more. So we could certainly see that with Jaden Reed. The problem is, like, we were getting Amon-Ra St. Brown for cheap 2 years ago. We were getting Cooper Kupp for cheap 3 years ago. We're not getting Jaden Reed for cheap. People are already expecting him to make that jump. And if he doesn't, it's just such a bad pick.
Mm-hmm. So, Mr. Tip, how do you feel about this before I put any more input?
Yeah, for me, I am the believer in Romeo Doubs. I think I think Jordan Love trusts him. I think this is his team. Look at what he's done when they get closer to the red zone. Look at what he did. This is another thing that speaks to me too. I look at what players do if they get to the playoffs. I look at that. And last year, Romeo Doubs had 2 playoff games. He averaged 6 targets per game, that's modest. But really, if you look at it, 6 targets a game will get you about 130 targets out of the year, which isn't bad. I don't think that's bad at all. Now, the thing with Jayden Reed is this kid is electric with the ball in his hands. And if you don't think that Coach LaFleur doesn't know that, and the other offense or defenses don't know that, this kid could be one of those guys who, again, in those 2-game samples that I'm talking about with in the playoffs, Jayden Reed had 7 targets. Now, that doesn't mean that, he wasn't in one of the games against the Cowboys. He didn't need they blew him out. So they didn't necessarily need to go back and forth. But in the game against the 49ers did have a game plan for him because they know that they have to take him out of the game because he's that electric. He's that fired up. Now, the ADP, the round that he's going, it is a little steep. It's going higher and higher and higher where you can actually wait a few rounds later and get somebody like a Romeo Doubs because for some reason, I don't know why people aren't getting, I guess it's because of all the weapons that they have there, but they just, for some reason, Romeo Doubs is staying where he's staying and Jayden Reed keeps going up. I think because everybody with the Debo factor, and, they think that you can get a situation like that. It could be the reasoning why. But for me, I'm not mad at it. I don't think it's a bad pick, but it also depends on how many positions you have at that spot. Like, for instance, how many, do you have enough wide receivers? Do you have a running back? If that's my second wide receiver, hell no, I don't want that. But if he's my third, fourth, I'll take a shot on that. It just really depends on what your roster construction has been.
So real quick, I'll say a player's name, and then you can tell me who you would rather have over the 2.
Oh, you better go way down the list if we're talking Jayden Reed. I'm like 30 spots below consensus on this guy.
Okay, all right. We'll start here, and then we'll work
Xavier Legette.
All right, let's start with Rashid Rice.
Rice easily.
Rice easy. Deontay Johnson.
Wait, Dave. Talk to us a little bit about Rashid Rice. What are some of the things that you were looking in for Rashid Rice?
He's really good at driving cars.
Yeah. I mean, that's the fear, is that he's suspended. But if he avoids suspension, which our Drew Davenport that we've got on Staff of Football Guys, he's a lawyer, he does great work, said that there's, very little chance that he gets suspended this year. So if he avoids suspension, like, we'd be talking about Rashid Rice as a 2nd or 3rd rounder, right? Based on what he did his rookie season. Week 5 onward, he was a week 14. Week 12 onward, he was the wide receiver 8. The only guys that outscored him over the second half of the season: Justin Jefferson, Amari Cooper, Amon St. Brown, Tyreek Hill, Nico Collins, Deebo Samuel, and CeeDee Lamb. I mean, Rashid Rice was on fire last year, and now I think that there are concerns about, Hollywood Brown being there, and concerns about Xavier Worthy being there, and Travis Kelce being healthy. But I think that there's just such I can go on and on about the Chiefs' passing attack. I did a deep dive on it earlier, but there was a huge delineation last year in how these wide receivers were used. Every single wide receiver in Kansas City last year either had a target depth of over 17 yards or less than 10 yards. So you've got MVS and Justin Watson doing nothing but running 9 routes. And then you've got Rashid Rice and Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore. They're all working underneath. So I think that when we see Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown in this offense, they're going to do more of that deep downfield stuff, which is complementary to Rashid Rice, because Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy are going to pose bigger threats to defenses than MVS and Justin Watson were able to. So then you got defenses playing on their heels, stretch vertically. That's just even better for Rashid Rice to work underneath. So Rashid Rice right now, easily taking him ahead. I heard you said Deontay Johnson. I can go on a big long spiel about Deontay Johnson as well. Already talked about the Panthers offense. I think he's going to see 150, 160 targets in this offense. So like I said, I'm low on Jayden Reed. Like you got to go pretty far down the list. Like, to me, he's more of like a wide receiver 5, but he's getting drafted as a wide receiver 3.
Lad McConkey.
All right, I'll take Jayden Reed over Lad McConkey.
Christian Watson's ADP is currently 103.
I've got Watson ahead of Jayden Reed in my rankings. When you look at the sample size last year, they played about 150 snaps together, where it was Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Jayden Reed on the field together. Christian Watson had the most targets, the most yards, the most touchdowns, the most yards per reception. Like, every single metric favors Christian Watson as the wide receiver 1. The only fear is his hamstrings. But like, if Christian Watson's healthy, his ceiling is so much higher than Jayden Reed's.
Yeah, Christian Watson is an elite route runner. His hamstrings are much like Kyle Pitts, not elite at all. DeAndre Hopkins?
That's a close one for me, but I'm gonna go Hopkins. Hopkins is
Yeah.
another guy that I'm bullish on. I got him ahead of Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you on that one. Alrighty. So real fast, I'm gonna before we wrap up this episode, because we are reaching the hour mark, I'm just gonna list a couple names and you guys are gonna just yay or nay it for me. All right.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Just like in comparison to Jaden Reed, or
No, just in general. In general.
All right.
In general. Christian Kirk.
Yeah.
Nay. I like him, just too
Ooh.
expensive.
Okay. Terry McLaurin.
Yay.
Chris Godwin.
Yay.
Nay.
Zach Moss.
Nay.
Nay.
Jake Ferguson.
Nay.
Yeah.
Here's my thing with Jake Ferguson, real quickly. It's not that I dislike Jake Ferguson. I just hate that whole tier of tight ends. Like I said, like you got to get one of those top 7, top 8 guys. If you don't have those, paying up for Ferguson and some of those other guys scare me a little bit.
I just think they're going to be chunking the ball. their defense is in shambles. The running back, who's their running back? Is it Ezekiel Elliott? Is it Mini-Me? Is it? There's so many variables.
Royce Freeman's the guy that's been getting camp buzz.
Malik Davis. I mean, it's just I don't even want to touch that situation. So I think they're gonna be chunking the ball. And Dak wants to get paid.
I really hope the Cowboys pay Dak, mostly because I want to see that team crumble. Brian Robinson Jr.
Yay.
Yay.
Yeah. Brock Bowers.
Yay. 100.
I'll sit this one out.
Yeah, I'm gonna sit this one
Tip's
out.
Feelings.
Yeah.
No, you're gonna hurt my feelings, Dave. We'll talk more about it.
I'll be in on Brock Bowers next year when he's much cheaper.
I'll be on Brock Bowers as soon as he gets a hair transplant. Then he's all right.
Can I give my guy? I'm going to avoid it. It'll be really quick.
I want to hear
Go
it.
for it.
This quarterback's ADP right now is sitting at 26. And we were talking about quarterbacks like Trevor Lawrence. We talked a little bit about Justin Herbert and some other shows. Jalen Hurts, man. I don't know if I'm willing to take the dive on that. Because for the simple fact is, again, his ADP is that high. I'm not a big fan. A lot of people aren't fans of taking quarterbacks that high. You have to take a quarterback like that high. I really think his rushing goes down. I think that Saquon Barkley is going to be on a tear this year. Long as this kid stays healthy, he is going to be on a tear. And he just found out on Hard Knocks that the recorded or the conversation that he had with Joe Sheen, the GM in New York, was secretly recorded, and he didn't find out until Hard Knocks came on. Oh, you about to see especially against the Giants.
He's going for 250 and 3 touchdowns twice this year.
Especially in the Giants, poor guys. You guys, but I'm just not big on Jalen Hurts. I understand that, hey, look, you've got AJ Brown, you've got Devonta Smith. You've got a good offensive line. I know they're missing Kelsey, but you've got a good offensive line still, cohesive unit. But I'm not willing to take on that draft capital because I feel like with somebody like Jalen Hurts, you rely so much on his rushing and his rushing touchdowns that those are both going to come down with the running back like Saquon Barkley. They've never had a running back like Saquon Barkley since Jalen Hurts has taken over. So they're going to see that this offense can go to another level by running the ball and utilizing him. The other thing, too, I really like Johnny Wilson. I think that was a great pickup they did in the draft. 6'6", slot guy. But I just don't think it's going to be enough. So I'm, again, 26, round 20, or ADP of 26. I'm out on Jalen Hurts, man. I'm not going to do it.
I get it. I mean, you look over his career. Rookie season, he had 3 rushing touchdowns, then 10 touchdowns, then 13 touchdowns, then 15 touchdowns. Like, it's just not a pace that he's going to be able to maintain. Like it's going to have to come back down to earth at some point. And I think that with the injury last year, he picked up that knee injury. I don't think they want him in those scrums with a bunch of 350-pound offensive linemen.
They don't.
Like they paid Saquon Barkley all this money, so Jalen Hurts can do what Lamar Jackson does and just turn around and give the ball to his running back when they're inside the 5-yard line. So I think we're going to see a change in philosophy for the Eagles as well.
24% of Hurts' fantasy points came from rushing touchdowns, and I think he could thank
Crazy.
DeAndre Swift for a majority of those because he every single
Wasn't an
time.
extra fence at the goal line, man. Like,
Yeah,
he couldn't get there.
he was allergic to scoring at the one. The chances of that happening again this year, very little, very little. And while I like AJ Brown and Saquon, those are the only two players that I'd probably want on that team, especially because the Eagles specifically had zero answers for cover zero man blitzes. That was their kryptonite. They had no chance and no answer for it. And we saw that when their season just automatically just stumbled, crashed, fell. I don't know what kind of adjective you want to use to describe that season, specifically the end of the season, more specifically the playoff game. God, that was terrible. But unless they have an answer for that, then it's going to be another struggle bus for the Philadelphia Eagles. All right. Oh, okay. So real quick, I'll give a couple more, and then we're gonna cut it for the episode. Crystal, and no, wait, hold on. I'm still really high up on the thing. Okay, we ended up. Yeah,
yeah. And he hurt his hip today too.
I saw that ankle. I thought he got carted off. Right? I thought they said it was an ankle.
it was a hip injury. Yeah.
Austin Eckler.
Nay.
Yay, just because he's so cheap.
He's so cheap. It's like, why not at that point?
Draft
You said yay or nay. I say nay.
Yeah, and
I'll draft him as my RB5 and keep him stashed on the bench just in case.
Xavier Worthy.
Yay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
That's gonna be
Brock Purdy.
Yay.
Yeah. Raheem Mostert.
Yay.
Yay.
Yeah. I think the same as the price last year. I think it's really cheap. All right, last one. Aaron Rodgers.
Nay.
Yay.
41-year-old who's like he's not going to rush for 20 yards this season. Like I get worried about him. I think they're going to run a lot.
They are going to run the ball, but I see a scenario where Aaron Rodgers still gets about 27 touchdowns, and his interceptions will be a little low, and I still
Garrett Wilson.
Man, look, Garrett Wilson will probably have 25 of them.
Yep.
So I always like to have a couple fun players on my roster. Just some of them that I'm like, I want to watch you play. Like more specifically, I want to watch you play. And Aaron Rodgers is one of those guys where I'm like, you know what? I want to see you play. Like I might have red zone on specifically, and then I might turn on that game on specifically, or somebody like Tyreek Hill, Patrick Wells. I usually kind of have like a separate screen on another monitor just for watching a specific thing. And he's one of those guys where I'm like, you know what, this year I'm going to put him on a separate monitor. I want to watch it play and see how it goes. But all right, that's going to wrap up this episode. I'll let you guys give a sign off. David, where can everybody find you?
Real easy. You can just find me over at Football Guys these days. All my content I share to my Twitter account. So at Dave Kluge, you can follow me there if you're into jokes and memes and sarcasm and hopefully good content.
Mr. Tip, how about you?
Yeah, at Tippmajor, a lot of different things that I'm working with. We talked about it earlier, but just follow me and you can see some of the stuff that I have. I have some of my articles from last year on there. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Yeah, I would recommend it, but no, I don't want you guys to follow me. I did some trolling the other day. I don't need you guys to see what I did. That's my Twitter personality. I just go. If you're having a bad day, I just want you to know, if you're having a bad day, don't let me know you're having a bad day. I'll make sure it's a worse day. But all right, other than that, good luck, everybody.
Peace out.
I'm ready. I'm ready for all today.